Hey folks, today we're testing cheap Amazon dent repair tools in a professional shop. Let's see how they work.
It was always me versus me, it was never me versus you. Misunderstood, get up, had to beat those odds. Got up and I beat those odds. It's understood. It was always me versus me, it was never me versus you. And now I'm good. Wake up and I do my part, wake up and I do my job just how I should. It was always me versus me, it was never me versus you. Misunderstood, get up, had to beat those odds. Got up and I beat those odds.
All right, first things first, a little warning. Viewer discretion is advised. Although I am a professional paintless dent repair technician, this is not a professional tutorial on what every tool is and how to use them. If at the end of this video you decide to purchase these tools, please, I encourage you to do some homework. There's some great technicians out there with some killer content on how to use these tools properly. So, with that said, these are 3 individual purchases, all totaling $150, which is about the same price as just one of our professional tools here. So for the price, my expectations aren't super high, but initially as we unpacked them, they were all packaged really well. The lens here wasn't cracked. That was the first thing I was looking for when I unboxed this. I thought for sure this was gonna be cracked. And then this set right here was actually packaged pretty well. They zip tied these 4 together. They zip tied these hand tools together, and everything had each individual bag. So initially I was impressed. It's safe to say it's probably gonna get to you safe if you do order these. Now, back to this set. This is what this maker has decided should be in a basic general set for you to have at home if you are gonna be attempting to fix a dent. And I kind of agree. They've touched on some of the elements that you do need to be able to reach the dent, push the dent, knock the dent down. So they've got you set up so far. Now the quality of the tools is a whole other thing. So they had these 4 zip tied together, and they're right. So these are more like your rods, your push rods. These are gonna have a little bit further reach out to a dent, maybe further reach down into a door cavity to get to a dent, a little bit thicker rod so you can push a little bit harder. So they had these zip tied together. These are your push rods. Were they created how I would have liked? No, I probably would have had this head pointed in this direction. This is gonna be like your pick. So we call this type of head a pick. So if it was pointed this way, it would be a killer push rod, but it's got it pointed the other way. So the design is a little bit wonky. The actual make of the rod, this is not gonna be heat treated spring steel, machined and shaved down properly like a lot of our tools are. These are gonna be kind of rough around the edges, designed a little wonky, but these are your rods. And then they had these are your brace or your hand tools here, and they simply are exactly what they sound like. These brace tools are designed to get up into a brace, like behind your hood, into your trunk, areas where there is a brace. These get into it so you can push up the dent. So we have a couple of different kind of tools, length, angles. So we got rods, brace tools. Now in order to get a good push with your rods, you got to have some sort of leverage point. So they've included these 2 S-hooks and a ring. So what you would do is simply put the ring on this S-hook. This end of the hook would go into some sort of access hole on the back of a panel, and then you would be able to slide your tool into the ring and then be able to push on the dent. So they've given you some leverage, and if you needed an extension, they've added the second S-hook to be able to use this bottom axis right there. So they've given you some leverage to be able to push. Now when you push on the dent, if you push too high, you need something to be able to knock it back down. So they've included a hammer and some knockdowns. We've got our plastic knockdowns. They also gave you a really cool interchangeable tip here. So we've got the male thread, and you can put these different tips on here. Now these particular tips, they're not gonna be polished to a mirror finish just like our tools. So these are gonna be kind of rough. I wouldn't suggest maybe these, if I was you at home, maybe use this one as a knockdown. This one is gonna be great for pushing. So you could they did give you 1 rod with an interchangeable tip here with the male thread. So you could put on the tip here, little rough threading. So, oh buddy, Oh man. Okay, so goodness gracious. Okay, little rough at the first there, but once it's on, cool. And then they gave you these package of these little rubber tips right here. So these are what we would call cherry tips. Ours are usually red, so we call them a cherry tip. These are orange. These are like a tomato cherry tip. But we got these little orange tips here, little rubber coating. You would put it over that so you have a little bit softer of a push. If you wanted to get more precise with your push, then you could take that cap off and use just that end piece there. Also got a really cool big giant like a clown nose. So you imagine when screwing this one off and this one on, get a lot broader push and push out bigger dents right there. So some cool interchangeable tips to go with this. Again, they're not polished down, so they're not going to be as gentle on the paint as we would prefer as professionals, but you got some knockdowns with some different shape tips here, so you can make a different kind of contact. If you want a more precise contact when knocking down the dent, you've got this. If you want a more broad contact, you've got these here. So also included into the kit is some tape. So their thought behind this probably is we usually use Tessa tape, gaffer's tape on our professional tools. Where's the end here? But on theirs, you probably take a little tape off, put it on the end of a tool here, and now this will help you from slipping around behind the metal, get a little bit softer contact, a little bit less slippage. So they've included some tape. That was kind of thoughtful. Now, when you're pushing the dent and knocking the dent down, none of that can happen first without accessing the dent. So if it's on your door, you got to take the door panel off, or if the dent's on the hood and you got to take the liner out, you got to be able to address taking those trim pieces off. So they've included a trim tool. So we've got a clip trim tool here. This will slide up into the clip and then push, leverage that off and get the clips off. Or if it's inside of the door cavity, in order to get between the glass and the door trim at the bottom, you got to create some sort of gap. So they've included a wedge. Again, this almost feels like it was 3D printed. It's kind of like that weird plastic. I wouldn't trust this as much. It'll probably do the job if it's one or two times used, but this feels like it's going to be pretty rough on some glass. That curve is a little bit more of a curve than I would prefer. Our glass on our doors don't curve that hard. Maybe a little bit softer curve would be nice, but this is to create a wedge into some places so you can get a tool down in there. And if this isn't the ideal separation tool to go with, they've included a really cool air blow-up bladder. So it's holding air. That's pretty cool. So let's release that. It releases well. So for what it is and how many times you're actually going to use this, this isn't that bad. Ours are going to be a little bit more durable for frequent use, but for what it is, 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 dents over the lifetime of your kit, this might actually be a pretty cool insert. So for what this lot is at $80, if this ends up pushing, even a couple of door dings in your garage, I would say so far, without putting it to use, this might be worth it. So I look forward to actually pushing on a dent. Now, if you can't see the dent, you can't fix the dent. So the next thing you need is some sort of light or a line board. Now the line boards are going to be a lot cheaper, a lot more budget friendly, but the light is going to illuminate the panel and allow you to see the dents for what they are. So I went ahead and splurged and spent a couple extra bucks and got a light that is actually going to illuminate, and it's even got an adjustable or customized where we can use a certain, little pattern here. We could have the 2 outside LED strips or just one, but we'll be able to customize. This will have 3 LED strips that will light up and let us see the panel really, really well. This, I believe, was $40, and this was just for me for fun. This was 20 bucks. I really just wanted to see what this hammer was going to be like. This is similar to what we would have, like a blending hammer, where we're reaching out and hammering out a crown around a dent, but it is extendable. I thought that was going to be pretty cool, so you could lock it down and have a little bit longer hammer. I thought this would be fun. This is definitely not real carbon fiber, and this is definitely a little bit heavier than what our tools are, but lighter than I thought it was going to be. We're going to have to try this out. It's pretty cool. This little set here did come with another knockdown. These are really, really short knockdowns, so it's kind of hard to get behind, you know, the knockdown and actually see the dent in the light. I like a little bit longer knockdown so I have a better visual presentation, but they do give you a knockdown. This particular tip came into the bag with this one because they probably know this is going to be the tip to go with to get real precise in knocking down dents. They also gave a set of metal tips. These look like they're roughly designed around the same designs as the company VIP and their tips. So this looks like VIPs, and this plastic set here looks like Anson's tips. But these are different tips that you can take and interchange on both your knockdown, or you can use them over here on either this knockdown, or we could probably put another thread and use some over there on the push rod. But because they're plastic threaded here, they're not going to be as durable. You go to hit a couple of times, there's a good chance that that little post could break off. But for 150 bucks, I think it's pretty cool to have kind of every little initial basic piece that you need to push a dent. So let's get these put to use on a panel and actually see if the cheap Amazon dent repair tools are going to go to work for us. All right, now we've got a beat up practice hood that I use when training my students. I got a storage full of these. It's got a whole bunch of hail damage on there, and I've got some of my tools already set up roughly as close as possible to how I would be using them. So I've got 2 knockdowns. I've got one with a little bit sharper plastic tip, and then I've got one of the metal tips that's a little more precise, but it's got kind of a slightly polished tip close to the VIP tip. So I've got my 2 knockdowns, I've got my hammer, I've got my blending hammer as close as possible from what we have available. How I would set mine up, I would have a kind of slightly rounded polished blending tip here, and then I would have some sort of rubber tip, preferably a different type of tip. Again, for what we have, this is gonna be kind of my more broad contact and then my blending tip here. So I've got my hammers, I got my knockdowns, we've got our rod that we're going to be going with because of this particular hood, this panel, and the axis that we have underside. We're going to be using a push rod with the interchangeable tip here with the orange rubber cap, and when we get a little more precise, we'll take that orange cap off. So if you'll come around, or if you'll come up a little bit closer, let's take a look at the light. So the light, actually, for 40 bucks, this is pretty cool. As I was saying before, you can turn these off. You can pick whatever configuration you like. If you just want to use the one light, or you just want to use the 2 outside, or all 3. But we've got cool white, we've got a warm. So the 2 different colors really help you see the depth of the dent from a different perspective in one light compared to the other. It's got a suction cup on the back, which was a lot more substantial than I thought it was going to be. It sticks pretty good. Now this is a cabled, this is not a cordless light, so be prepared to provide your own power block. This does have the USB cable, but it doesn't have the block, so you're going to need a block to be able to plug that in. But for what it is, like I said, this is pretty killer for 40 bucks. This lens is a little bit closer to the LED stripes than I would like. I kind of like my lens just a little bit off of there to give it a little bit more of a blend, a fade, allow these lights to kind of blend out a little bit further out. But because the lens is so close to those LED light strips, they're going to be kind of real tight lights. So, but again, 40 bucks, you can't beat this. That's pretty cool. So as you can see, the dents pretty good compared to not being able to have any light at all. It's really hard to see your dents. So if you can't see your dents, you can't fix the dents. So let's get these lights turned on over here and let's talk about how we're actually going to push these dents. So we're going to be using our 2 S hooks and our ring for some leverage. Again, these would go into some sort of access hole on the back side of the panel. Because this is a training hood, I have a hole drilled out here for another drill that we were doing, literally a drill that we were doing, a little push challenge that we were doing. So I have a little hole drilled out here, so we're going to use that. But the end of the S-hook would go right into that hole right there, and then we would take our ring and set it right there. So that's going to give us good access to be able to take our rod, go through that hole, and now we have a leverage point to be able to push the dents right here. And because the hood of the back of the hood here is wide open, we'll be able to push on the back of this panel just like so. And if it was in a brace, like these are braces right here, if the dent was right above a brace, that's where we would use one of our brace tools. We'd go right into one of the access holes right in there to be able to push out a dent. But the dents we're going to be using for this example are right in the open right here. So we're going to be starting off with our little cherry tip right there. Now, if we needed a little more lowering of the leverage, we would add that second S-hook, put our tool down here at the bottom. But this is a perfect distance right here compared to where our dents are. All right, if you'll swing back around, let's go ahead and get into pushing some of these to see how these tools feel. So again, we've got our rod, we've got our cherry tip. I'm gonna put it right into the access hole right here. These are gonna be the dents that we're gonna be looking at today. So I have a little pink brackets here to show you where we're gonna be focusing. We're gonna be using our light to be able to see the dents properly. And let's see how these feel. So we're going to start with this one right here on the right side. I'm literally with my left hand just going to guide the tip behind the dent. With my right hand, I'm going to start pushing that dent. So we're going to find that far right side, going to find the center of the dent. And so leverage wise, you know, it's not really kind of giving me a whole lot of strength to push from. There's no flex, there's no it's not bad. Okay, I got to keep putting it into the perspective of an $80 set of tools. And so for what it is, this is actually pretty cool, man. Our expensive tools really go to work for us and make us make our job a lot easier. But for what it is, you know, we've got up most of the dent on this cherry tip. This has a little more flex than I would like. The cherry tips that we use really allow us to get real precise. This feels a little bit different, but again, I've got this bias for the professional tools that we use. So if this was a DIY set that you were buying for your garage, this is actually pretty killer. So let's take this cherry tip off here. And let's just go straight up metal on metal, this little ball tip. So we'll go back through the axis, get behind the dent. We've got this second dent that's right here. So I'm gonna reach out with my tool, find the tool tip with my left hand. I'm gonna guide. I'm basically on the back side of the panel, holding this tip and kind of guiding it out there and finding where that dent is. So I'm gonna reach out, find this tip, this tool here. And again, I didn't mention, this is aluminum. So aluminum is going to be a lot harder to push than your steel panels. Aluminum, it's a lot more difficult. As soon as you push, that dent will go right back to where it was, compared to steel. When you press on steel, the metal just moves and stays. So aluminum, you've got to kind of stay with it a little bit more. So I'm having to push a little bit harder, but getting right behind that dent, finding the absolute center. I'm not pushing through the dent, I'm just pushing with the metal. And look at that. That's pretty cool. For an $80 aluminum or $80 kit from Amazon, we're getting some hail fixed here. That's pretty wild. So let's go ahead and finish these out. Make them look a little bit cleaner here. That is wild. That is wild for this set. So these two are pushed out. All right, now let's just say you're pushing behind the dent, you push too hard, now you've over pushed. We called this a high, we've caused a high spot, we've over pushed, and now instead of having a dent, we now have like a little peak. So we've got to knock that down, and we're gonna wanna have our knockdown of some sort, and you want your knockdown to kind of match the same damage. You don't want to use a huge knockdown on a teeny tiny little peak, and the vice versa. You don't want to use a tiny little knockdown on a big giant peak. So I want to try to match it up as best as possible. You're going to use your hammer to knock that down. So go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to intentionally get into this little spot over here, like right in here. Does that show up on the camera? Right in there? Okay, so I'm going to intentionally push right in this spot, and I'm going to over push and cause a little high spot. Does that show up? Okay, so now we've got ourselves a high spot.
That right there, right?
Let's zoom in just a little bit more. There we go. So now we've got ourselves a little high spot. I'm gonna take my knockdown and my hammer, this little high spot. Now we've over pushed. We've pushed too high. Now we can see our work. We wanna knock that work back down. So I'm gonna take my knockdown, the little point, right on top of that little high right there, and I'm going to use my hammer to hammer it down, okay? I'll be honest, I am having to hit pretty darn hard. You can zoom all the way back out again. I'm having to hammer pretty hard. You can just, yeah, that's fine. I'm having to hit pretty hard with this thing. I mean, it's like there's no weight behind it. Doesn't allow me to really get any kind of power behind the hit. Plus, we've got a small knockdown. So for what the set comes with as a professional, it's a no-go. As a DIY at home, you could probably get away with this if it's just a few dents over the lifetime of you owning this set in your vehicle. You could really get away with this, but yeah, this isn't, I can see it's not really marking the paint. So this plastic is not ideal quality-wise, but it's also not damaging it. I'm also wearing that tip down pretty fast, as hard as I'm having to hit with the hammer. There's just no weight with this hammer. You may want to take a hammer from at home, turn it around and use that handle again. Be very careful. Now aluminum, you have to hit a lot harder on the panel than steel. But we're dealing with paint that's as thin as a Post-it. So you want to be very, very careful on how you approach this. But that was knocking it down. That knocked the high down. And I'm sure that this little knockdown here, let me just feel this. You don't have to zoom in or out. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And no marking. That is actually, that's probably the better knockdown of all of these, this close to VIP's original knockdown as possible, the way this is designed. But these aren't that bad. It's just, you know, I'm used to a taller knockdown. So the distance, I'm coming down really close to where this knockdown is. And then this being super, super light, it's just hard to get any kind of power with that. But let's go ahead and reset, and I'll give you my opinion on these tools. All right, so the question is, do these cheap Amazon dent repair tools work in a professional shop? No. At home, for the DIYer, maybe the weekend warrior in your garage, you get a door ding every once in a while and maybe want to try to save a little bit of money in this economy, this might be a good purchase for you to have in your shop. I would give that an approval. From a dent guy to the average consumer, I would say this would be kind of fun. I did mess around with this hammer behind the scenes. It was fun. I would not suggest that you buy a blending hammer until you do a little bit more homework on what tension and compression and metal movement and metal flow and vibrating the metal. I wouldn't even mess with the blending hammer just quite yet. But for you other dent guys, this was kind of fun, man. I enjoyed this. For everybody that's just kind of looking at this video, should I buy this kit and use it at home? I'd say go ahead. The rods weren't that bad. If you have a good, slow, methodical approach, don't rush, don't over push, and don't over knock down, I think you can fix a dent every once in a while on your own vehicle. Again, always make sure that you're checking in with your local trusted paintless dent repair technician on any dent that's probably more than a dime or a nickel size. The light itself is an absolute go ahead. I would say buy this light at 40 bucks to be able to see the dent properly. This was actually pretty impressive. The suction cup is really, really nice. Stick to the side of the car, turn the light around, and now you can see your door dings. This was pretty cool. I really like this, okay? And all the accessories that come with it, the knockdowns, the leverage, the bladder to be able to open up and create an opening for your tools to reach down into your door, the knockdowns, the tape for protection, your trim tool to get panels off. This was actually a pretty fun review, and I would definitely do it again. I'm not going to use these in my shop, but for you at home, I'm not going to say no. I think these would actually be pretty cool. I'll tell you what, if I can get 50 likes on this video, I'll give this whole set away to one random viewer. Now do all the things, it's 2024. If you don't already know what to do on YouTube to support another channel, I can't help you. The like and subscribing and the commenting. Go do those things if you like this video and want to support this channel. 50 likes on here, I'll pick one of the random commenters down below and give this whole set straight out to you. Now, work hard and go be great.
Never going back to the bad side. Need holy water, get baptized. I'm that guy. That guy.